Hi, I'm Rachel Lancaster, and this is the Magnificent Midlife Podcast. This is where we celebrate women in midlife and beyond. We challenge the status quo and bash those negative stereotypes about being an older woman. We're not over the hill at 40, 50, 60. We're just getting started, and the world needs us now more than ever. I'll be talking all things midlife, about issues that matter, and sharing fabulous stories of amazing women doing very cool stuff. Now's our time. My guest today is Becky Quick, and Becky describes herself as the menopause psychologist. She is dedicated, like me, to helping women cope through menopause, especially with the emotional aspects of the transition. So Becky, it's lovely to have you here. I feel like I've known you for ages, but we've never actually met, so welcome.
I know it does. Yeah, it's lovely to finally connect with you.
And I know you're doing really powerful work, and I'm really keen to explore that and find out all about it. So why have you chosen to specialise in helping women in the perimenopause years?
Well, it's been a bit of a journey, and actually I've only been working in this particular area for about 2 years now. So I'm a clinical psychologist by training and have been working, I worked in the NHS for a good 10 to 15 years. I'm losing track of years now. And then I left the NHS and set up my own practice. So I've always worked with children and families, and that's what I did in my private practice as well. And then when I turned 40, I had one of those wonderful phases of midlife clarity and woke up really to myself, which is what I think can happen to a lot of women. A lot of my friends, we would talk about this, and it was almost like, having a real look at myself and my life and my career. And I realised that I wanted to pivot and change my direction of my career, and reconnected actually with when I say old, kind of passions from my teenage years, which were around women or back then, I was really full of it and kind of about women empowerment and all this kind of stuff. And then it just kind of went away throughout the years. Anyway, I reconnected with that and felt very charged to support women, I guess, with anxiety and around self-doubt, having realised that actually that was a feature of me. Even though on the outside I looked like I was, running this private practice and I was working as a clinical psychologist, actually there was a lot of self-doubt and a lot of anxiety there. So I did my own kind of work around that, realised I wanted to work to really support women, and at the same time started to track my menstrual cycle. I just happened upon actually Wild Power, the book by Red School. I don't know if you know about Red School.
Yes. So, yes, I do. I've heard of them. Yes.
Yeah, they're amazing, Alexandra and Shani. So I came across their book, Wild Power, and read that. That was like my personal, for me personally. And oh my goodness, it literally just, it did change my life, that book, because it made me realise that my menstrual cycle was actually an incredible thing rather than something to just kind of get through in terms of my period. And it also made me realise that all the kind of different energies that I experience. So sometimes I'm very introverted and need to be very quiet and very sensory sensitive. And then at other times I'm like, life and soul of the party. And I used to think there was something kind of wrong with me, that I could, and I could swing as well from one feeling and one way of looking at things and to another quite easily, but actually realised it's the menstrual cycle. So explored that and started to realise that the research and the knowledge around psychology actually fitted really beautifully with the menstrual cycle, and the menstrual cycle is almost like it can be your own little therapist if you follow it intimately yourself, and it can really help to tap you into the self-care the sort of areas of self-care that you really need. So I was working on that, and then realised that actually I was perimenopausal, and had my own experiences of heart palpitations and all sorts of random bits and pieces, and had lots of physical investigations. Realised I was perimenopausal, and just basically started exploring it. And I personally was using all of the psychological skills that I'm trained in using. I was just using them with myself. So whenever I'd get a heart palpitation, I would sort of observe them curiously, and was very sort of flexible. We call it psychological flexibility. So I was kind of quite flexible to how I was experiencing my body. So this is all going on in my personal life. And then I realised that actually that these skills that I use because I've been trained to use them would be so helpful for women. So I just started dabbling really and working with some women in this way, and then realised, oh my goodness, there's a huge need, and that actually, perimenopause and menopause, it was a new area for me to look into. And so it's just grown from there. And I absolutely love the work. I just love it. It's growing
oh, that's
quickly.
Brilliant. But you were quite early then, weren't you, to be going into perimenopause? And how was that for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think quite often this can be a bit of a trap, really. And I think women want to sort of know, oh, am I in? I mean, I say, oh, and I realise I was in perimenopause, because that's just kind of the words that we use. But it's, I think in a way that's a bit of an issue, that we sort of think, oh, I'm in perimenopause or I'm not. And actually what I say is that from your late 30s, early 40s, well, it's not just what I say, obviously this is the scientific kind of facts really, but our hormones are changing. So and so that's how it's going to be. And I know a lot of women experience different levels of fluctuations at different times. And of course we can go through phases where actually our cycle feels really steady and in a flow, and then there can be massive fluctuations, and then it can settle down again. Do you know what I mean? And I don't feel like it's particularly helpful to go, oh, I'm in perimenopause now, and that's that. Because I've worked with women who definitely have kind of almost coming in and out of it being a problem. On the one hand, I felt quite a lot of grief around having not worked intimately with my menstrual cycle for however many years, and only sort of discovering this incredible wisdom and wild power at the age of 40. But then at the same time, feeling quite relieved that I'd come across perimenopause so kind of early on, as it were, really, because a lot of the women I work with are at their late 40s, and they are absolutely on their knees and are saying, I wish I'd worked with you, or I wish I'd known all this in my early 40s. So yeah.
Well, you and I, we both want to just raise awareness, don't we, so that women don't have that response. And it's interesting that you talk about the grief of not knowing about this power, until you were in your early 40s. Well, I don't think I ever knew about it until, right now, actually. You've reminded me of that book. I've heard vaguely about Red Skull, but I never tracked my menstrual cycle. I never connected with that, inherent female energy that we have, and that, how powerful our hormones are. It just happened, and I never really thought about it. And it's not really since going through my early menopause that I have then begun to try and tap into my body and listen to my body and work out what my body is doing and start paying attention to it, because before I was just too busy. And I think, I often say, I'm sure it was the stress and the fact that I was too busy living this crazy bonkers busy life, that the early menopause happened, because my body just couldn't cope. But that's very interesting that so you've caught the tail end of it, at least, haven't you? That's the nice aspect of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that working with the cycle through our 40s, for women who are still cycling, it's a way of preparing for menopause itself, whenever that may come. Because you just said there, you know, in terms of tuning into our bodies, we don't. And it's interesting to think whether this is going to shift in generations to come. I mean, my daughters know they're only 6 and 8, but they know all about the menstrual cycle, and I'm very clearly, connecting to different energies at different times. I hope that it will shift as time goes on, but also, in a way, you know, we are in the summer of our lives, in our sort of 20s and 30s, and we are out there doing things. And I think that's okay as well. And I feel like we kind of we wake up to ourselves, like I said at the beginning, really, around the sort of turning in from 30s into 40s. And then to start tuning in and tracking our bodies, whether we've got a menstrual cycle or not, really, is the key. Yeah.
Yeah, there's so much more to uncover, I always find, about women. It's fascinating, isn't it? We're so rich. We have so much to understand and explore, and so much power.
Yeah, and it's innate.
Yeah,
it is,
isn't it?
You know, so like Red Skull will say, it's coded within us.
Yeah.
It's there within us, and it's just being able to understand, almost crack the code and tune into it. And I just absolutely love it. The wisdom my cycle, especially during my bleed, so they call that the inner winter, the wisdom it gives me when I am able to really surrender and sink into it is phenomenal. I get incredible insights.
Really?
Yeah. And so I will, I mean, this is all, so I've done a 9-month program with Red Skull around this. And so I want to, obviously, I've mentioned them a few times, but it's through that work that I've learned to do that. And they talk about, go and bleed on it. So if there's something, you know, like either it's a decision or something that's kind of troubling you, or whatever it might be, let it go. You know, you don't focus on it. You don't think, right, I'm bleeding now, I'm going to think about it. You just let it go. You sink into your bleed, and it all rises up. Whatever you need to know. Well, that's how I experience it.
I've really missed out now. I'm thinking, oi, I've missed out. I haven't bled for over 10 yees now. What do I do? How do I make decisions?
Well, and I guess, I mean, you know, I don't know whether you do track the moon. A lot of women who are post-menopause, you know, still talk about a cyclical energy. I don't know if you experience that. You know, you're not linear, you're still cyclical.
This is something I would really like to explore, actually, because I just don't know. I haven't experienced it personally, but that's probably because I'm too busy again. I'm still not tapping into myself, and I certainly don't follow the moon. But maybe, you know, I suppose I need to, you know, track it and see what might be happening. So I just don't know. That's the honest answer. But I have heard that we can still be cyclical, even, you know, after menopause.
Yeah, I mean, obviously this isn't my personal experience, but it's from women who I know or have worked with who are postmenopausal. And yeah, they still do feel cyclical energies. And the moon can be just a really helpful way of organising ourselves in a way, and organising our tapping into different energies, with the new moon being like the inner winter, the bleed time, the time that you can really kind of connect with your wisdom and think about going forward into the next cycle and what you might wish for, and planting those seeds of growth, really. And then the full moon being almost like ovulation and kind of celebration of ourselves, and very much saying yes to who we are and what we're doing. And yeah, I have found since I've been tracking it that I am hugely impacted by the moon.
Wow.
But again, in a way, I just kind of was all in, you know, how I experienced this was that I was all over the place in my 20s and 30s. I probably wasn't. I probably was very much in terms of my menstrual cycle and the moon, very much connected to those energies, but I just didn't know it. But I have noticed how sensitive I am to those energies I mean, sometimes I'm literally bonkers ecstatic at full moon. It's like, it's incredible. It's like a drug. I'm just like, yeah.
Oh, wow. So do I need to go and read this book then? Wild Power.
Well, do you know, we had some women who were on the programme who last year when I did the intense sort of deep dive into it with them, who were post-menopausal. And they actually found it really helpful to understand, look back retrospectively, you know, on their menstrual cycle. It was quite healing for them, you know. So I think it's useful. Ooh. But I know that Alexandra Pope, who's the co-founder of Red Skull, she's in the middle of writing her menopause book. So her passion is menopause. She's postmenopausal.
So I should get her on the podcast then.
Oh gosh, 100%.
Yeah?
She's
okay.
very aligned with you. Yeah. Oh yeah, about menopause. Oh yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Excellent. There we go. Got to get her signed up.
Yeah, definitely.
Brilliant. So why, apart from all this ruddy fluctuating hormone malarkey, why can our mental health be such an issue during perimenopause?
Oh gosh, well, it's huge and it's varied and it's multi-layered and it's unique to everyone. That's the thing. What I think goes underneath it all, in a way, what's the kind of the foundation or the thread that weaves through everyone and everything, is how we respond to our bodies and to the changes. That kind of almost sets the tone in terms of our mental health. Because I could talk in detail about every area of our emotional, well-being is impacted, but every area of our physical well-being is as well. Our hormones are so, they are foundational to our whole bodies, aren't they, and our minds. So in a way, I sometimes think, I don't know, I'm in two minds about these kind of symptom checklists. On the one hand, it's really helpful for women to sort of hear anxiety, low mood, panic, loss of, identity, lots of these sort of psychological, and then obviously all the physical symptoms. It's kind of helpful because women are like, okay, that could be to do with, my hormones and perimenopausal. But you could literally list everything in the body and the mind, everything, because our hormones impacts everything. So I think why mental health can be such an issue is what is it, like I say, how we respond to that. So we'll have hormones fluctuating and we will, whatever that might be for each individual. And it's then, what do we perceive of those changes? And if we think, oh my God, whatever, oh my God, that means, even the word perimenopause and menopause can kind of bring about a sense of fear and anxiety. And it's those responses to our bodies that I think sort of changes how our emotional kind of journey through this, and also our willingness or not to experience the changes that we are having. So if we are fighting against our body's experiences, then we're going to get caught in traps. So it's just going to feed into the kind of threat system that we have. Whereas if we respond to the whole kind of idea and journey, well, not the idea, that it's not an idea, obviously, it's a factual journey, through our 40s and 50s. If we respond to it in a kind of, okay, I'm going through this. I don't want to fix it. I don't want to bypass it. I'm actually going to go through this. If we have that kind of response to our bodies, and if we can respond to the actual physiological sensations with curiosity, then we're at a place where our mental health isn't impacted so much. I don't know if does that make sense?
Yeah, completely. And I see that completely. But I also think that there is so much that society brings to how we respond, because we see as a society so much of our value wrapped up in our fertility and our beauty, and we are taught that aging is bad. We are, we're not taught anything about menopause, but we fear it like the plague. We don't want to be mutton. We don't want to be older. And that all impacts everything as well. And I think I like to say, that we've been working with our wombs all our lives, and menopause is not the time to start fighting them. It's exactly what you were saying. It's that accept it, be curious, experience it. I mean, I actually, once I got over the, oh my God, I'm a shriveled up old prune narrative that I had initially with the early menopause, once I managed to think, okay, well, I need to experience this because I'm not a different person. I'm no less than I was. Then I was more able to cope with it. But anxiety does still seem to be very prevalent, doesn't it? Even if, for example, me, I think I'm pretty good about menopause and perimenopause now, but I can see that, anxiety has been an issue. But whether that's just the stage of life I'm at or specifically menopause, I don't know. Whether it's hormone related or not, it's really difficult to know, isn't it, sometimes, because there's so much going on.
Yeah. But, I mean, the biologically, the threat system is dialed up in perimenopause. That is what happens. It's related to the amygdala, to the sort of threat system in our brain, and so we are more in threat mode. That's kind of many of us are. That's kind of like a biological fact. And this is where I get to thank you, because I'll link this in, but it was your podcast with who's the lady that wrote Flash Count Diary?
Darcy Steinke.
Yes. I've just gone all shivery. I mean, I can even remember where
she gave me shivers. She made me cry. She made me cry in that podcast.
Incredible. Well, I listened to that podcast. I was in Tatton Park because I was living in Knutsford at the time, and I was just absolutely blown away listening to that, and the story of the fact that that whales are the only other mammal or animal that go through menopause. I then really explored that and thought a lot about that, and looked into it. Just thought it was incredible. I guess that is the sort of psychologist and sort of anthropologist in me, because I then thought, well, if the hormonal changes at this time really dial up the threat system, which they do, anxiety is one of the most prevalent kind of issues with women. And a lot of women who haven't experienced anxiety before, they're suddenly, feeling overwhelmed by anxiety. What does that mean evolutionary-wise? And so when we look at, as a psychologist, whenever something means that the threat system's dialed up, you kind of look at that and think, okay, so why? Because obviously, therefore, we need to keep ourselves safe. And if you look at the other initiations of a female, the initiatory journey of menarche, starting our periods, and so adolescence, that the threat system's dialed up then, because of course, and I'm talking very evolutionary wise here, but girls then become able, God forbid, not that young age, but they become able to reproduce. So as a species, we need that to take place. So they become very precious, and so the threat system's dialed up to keep them safe, for them to keep themselves safe. Same happens at the second massive initiation for women, which for some women who go through motherhood, so prenatally and then postnatally, threat system is dialed up. Become very, very aware of a threat, because of course we're keeping the young, safe. So it happens again at menopause. Why the heck's that? And I guess this is how I see it, which is we need to call it something else, that grandmother hypothesis. But the hypothesis that we are precious at this time of life. Women are a precious jewel in society, in the ongoing kind of species, development of our species. And so like the whales, I'll just repeat the kind of for those who I'd just say go back and listen to that podcast of yours, but it's that the female whales, they'll go through menopause and then they become the leader of the pod, and that ensures that their species continues, because they show them the with their wisdom of the many years of understanding the seas, where to go when it's for the best time for food and warmth, all those kind of things. They basically mean that the pods survive. So they are really important in the whale society. And so, I mean, I just think biologically there's something going on for us as well. Humans need women post-menopause.
I believe
Otherwise
that.
We're screwed.
I'm going to shout that from the rooftops. You know me. I mean, that absolutely. That is absolutely my message.
Yeah.
How do I like that? Oh.
So the threat, in a way, and that's what's really tricky, because sometimes, I'll, like, for example, I saw the other day, I mean, this is so common. I saw something on Instagram about driving anxiety. Someone was talking about that, because that's quite a big difficulty for a lot of women who suddenly become very anxious of driving and going on the motorways and blah, 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 blah. And anything really, any area of our lives, a lot of women become very focused on or very anxious around their health and around death and their mortality and all these kind of pockets of anxiety. And in a way, I kind of think, well, yeah.
Well, we have to survive, don't we?
It makes sense.
We have to survive in this new iteration.
Yeah. So it makes sense to be sort of, to be, in a way, to be thinking, actually, driving down the motorway, in a tin can is not, it kind of makes sense that the threat system's dialed up. Of course, it's about then, understanding that, because we have got ancient evolved bodies in a ridiculously developed modern world. So I don't know whether, you would, have thought about this, or I'm presuming you'd agree, but we're not fit for purpose, men and women. So our human bodies do not suit this modern world, because evolutionary wise, it takes thousands of years for
us to evolve.
Changes to take place. Yeah. Whereas the modern world's just gone crazy, hasn't it? So
I always wonder why we still have so many teeth. Why do most of us need braces to not look like a graveyard? Surely we would have evolved by now to have less teeth. And that's just my
really funny.
Random fact there. I've always wondered that. It's like, why do we still have so many teeth?
Yeah. Well, there are a few things we don't need anymore, but yeah. Menstrual cycles is not one of those, though. We do need those, don't we? And so it's about, and I guess this is where my work comes in, really. It's about helping women live, through the menopause in this bonkers, crazy modern world in a way that is taking them towards their own fulfillment, So in terms of driving, for example, if it's about knowing what is kind of driving us, well, I didn't actually mean that. That's a bit of a pun, but it's important for us to go to wherever it's going to be. And so therefore we have to take our anxiety with us. So that's the psychological skill, rather than, I'm feeling anxious, and it does obviously it feels awful, discomfort and the physiological sensations. If we try and get rid of it and push it away and tell ourselves we're ridiculous for being anxious, we've been driving for 20 years, why, beat ourselves up, then that's going to feed into obviously more fear. Whereas actually if we go, do you know what, it kind of makes sense that I'm, more anxious about this. I'm going to take my anxiety with me. It's what I always talk to women about. Sling it in your backpack. And I don't mean literally, but whatever it is, you take the anxiety with you. And then that releases us from the trap, and it releases us from a lot of the discomfort, actually, if we can learn how to be willing to feel some of the anxiety. Paradoxically, we then don't feel as bad.
But that's like with many emotions, isn't it? If we allow ourselves to feel it and to identify it, feel it, don't fight it, because the more you fight it, the worse it gets, isn't it?
Yeah. yeah. And it sounds so simple, doesn't it? But in a way, that is the bread and butter. What you've just described, that's the bread and butter of the work I do. And there are some really wonderful psychological processes and approaches to help us to be able to do that. But also what's really, really important is how we connect with our true selves. So how, in a way, in perimenopause, I sort of see that women, in terms of like psychologically, turn back towards themselves and kind of almost look at themselves and like, oh my goodness. Whereas before we've been out there doing all the things out there. Now we're starting to look in here. And a big part of the work I do is to help women to reconnect. Obviously, I'm here. You can see me visually. I'm like, reconnect with our true essence and who we truly are, and then face outwards from that position. And then the psychological skills that I teach flow so easily if we really, really, like I say, connect with our souls and our spirits in that way.
Well, Darcy Steinke talks as well about the lifting of the estrogen veil. You know, that when that is lifted, and we are not so governed by that and by our cycles, that we can reconnect with a more authentic version of ourselves. And maybe even going back to pre-puberty times, you know, when suddenly everything changed when we went through puberty. And a lot of women talk about that. Jo Mosley has been on my podcast. She talks about, you know, feeling like she felt before puberty, actually, you know, having the kind of personality and outlook on life that she had pre-puberty. And if that was good, which I think for most of us it was, hopefully, if that was good, then that's a good thing, isn't it? That we get a chance to reconnect with our most authentic, original self. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, when you're talking there, I've got lots of thoughts sort of pinging off about that, because the veils are lifted. I mean, I smiled when you said that, because I, you know, fully embrace that. I bloody love it. I love it. Women really kind of connect with the reality of how things are. You know, none of this kind of estrogen, or almost is like the summer sun makes everything all nice and lovely. And it's almost like the veils, like you say, are lifting. It's like, oh my God, you know, but I love it. But of course, that can cause a lot of distress, because it's a lot to deal with, really, to have those veils lifted and to have those feelings of quite often anger and frustration. I have a lot of women, I mean, oh gosh, I mean, when they say this, I love it, because I just know that we can channel this in an amazing way. But they will say to me, I'm so scared of unleashing this anger. And so, because they're putting a lid on it, and I'm like, oh, come on. Because it isn't about throwing the anger here, there and everywhere. It's about really holding on to it, allowing that emotion to kind of fertilize in a way, holding it in, and then choosing with conscious decision where to focus that. And that is the stuff that can, you know, that can change the world, quite honestly.
I agree, because the flip side of anger is passion, isn't it?
Yeah.
And if we can see the anger as not as something bad, but as something good, that we, as you say, we can channel into something that we can make our passion, that absolutely midlife women can change the world.
And in a way, we get an experience of this every single menstrual cycle. For those women who do have some cycles, we get a dose of this every single cycle in our autumn, which is our premenstruum phase, because that is when estrogen declines in the cycle. And that is, you know, a time that lots of women say they struggle, but I guess they're struggling with the fact that, the veils are lifted momentarily. And it's not that stuff rises up that hasn't been there before. It's just that we're aware of it. Stuff that actually, whatever it might be frustrations, but it also might be traumas that need healing. It could be all sorts of stuff. There's stuff that's underneath, kind of, you become aware of it. And that's what I wanted to say, just to touch on before we go on to the next point, just in terms of the veils are lifted. This is a huge issue in perimenopause and menopause, that earlier, well, at any point in life, any kind of unresolved trauma in whatever shape or form that may be, or losses that have not been fully grieved, or anything like that. This time kind of calls us to tend to those wounds. And I know that a lot of women, that causes a lot of distress. But in a way, knowing that, I mean, I again think it's beautiful, but of course, I'm in a privileged position of being a therapist, and knowing, the kind of the approaches that we can use to help ourselves to heal and actually gather the gifts from that healing. So I appreciate that a lot of women aren't yet aware of that, but that's part of my work, really, to say that this is the time. Because what I have noticed in working with women, and this is why I absolutely love it, I mean, in a way, the healing and the therapy, the kind of inner growth, the emotional growth that can take place in the women who are at this stage, who are kind of cracked open by these hormonal changes, is phenomenal, and it can go at a rate of knots. Some of the women I've worked with, I just cannot believe how quickly, in a way, they can, and I don't mean there's no rushing about it, but they just, boom, they connect with some really deep core parts of themselves, because like we said, the veils are lifted and we're cracked open. They connect with it, and then, with the work and the psychological skills I teach, they can really just fly. And then that's where I see women, doing all the work in the world that we need them to do. So it's amazing. It's incredible, the development that can take place.
I know, I really do see it as a gift, having, even the early menopause for me, which, was devastating at the time, and now see it as a gift. And certainly now in my 50s, it's just, I am so excited about this time in life, and everything about it. And I'm, as you say, I'm different now. I'm a different person. I'm not who I was before, but I'm not less. I'm different. I'm evolving. I'm becoming, I think, a more authentic version of me. Yeah, and I also say that, the end of my fertility actually became the most fertile time of my life.
Oh, I like that.
It's a good one.
Yeah, I do like that. Yeah. And what I also like what you said there is that this kind of evolution, and that you are a different person now, because a lot of women will come to me and say, oh, I want to get back to being my old self. I don't feel like I'm who I used to be. I don't recognize myself anymore. And I want to get back to that. And I, will gently, have a discussion and develop a narrative around, actually, it's about evolving forward, not kind of going back to that. I understand that when things are wobbly, we do want to cling back to what we knew. I get it, and it's okay to feel like that, but it's about actually pivoting and, like you said, evolving forward into this new phase. But it does require some level of support and awareness. Otherwise, it can feel very daunting, I think.
And it's scary. I don't think there's any doubt it's scary. And I think for a lot of women, for whom like youth and beauty was a big part of who they were, or society's view of beauty or fertility, then because we have been programmed to see menopause just as a time of loss, whereas I don't see it like that anymore. I did when it started, but I do not see it like that anymore. And for me, I always say, I'm very happy with the way I'm aging physically. I don't have a problem with wrinkles and age spots or anything else. I'm very happy with it. They're like my honor stripes. I've earned them, Yeah. And sure. My body is changing, but I'm okay with that too. So I think it's how much you're able to embrace this transition rather than, as you say, clinging on to what came before, because that's what we've known for so long. But if we had more of a tradition of, like the Wales, having the older women guiding the younger women, and guide, because that's another reason why the Wales go through menopause, is because the older Wales are then not in competition with their daughters or their granddaughters for the male whale's attention.
Yeah.
So that's another reason for doing it, you know, because that is good for the species and good for the development of the species, as well as just continuing it. So I think if we can get back to more having that kind of idea of older women guiding younger women, but we seem to have lost that, don't we? That we don't really have that so much, I don't think, anymore, which is a shame.
No. But also, just when you're talking there, it's making me think about sexuality, actually. And, you know, because you just said in terms of the whales, they're not in competition with the younger, you know, whales. And if you think about that in human ways, and I know of lots of women, their sexuality and their sensuality and that kind of area, it feels like there's a huge shift. But when you were talking then, I was just thinking, well, it has the potential to be, again, I know it just sounds like me very kind of positive, but I truly believe this, so beautiful and powerful, because our sexuality, and whether that's with a partner or not, or with ourselves, I believe becomes more of a journey of deep connection with ourselves and with our partner. But you know, it's about that, and I've gone all shivery,
and exploration.
It's not to reproduce.
And I always say, you know, sex doesn't have to be penis and vagina if it's heterosexual sex. You know,
absolutely.
There's all sorts of other ways to explore and to have lots of fun. And I think because we think it's got to be the reproductive type, that for a lot of people, that's what sex means, isn't it? But there is you know, there's a smorgasbord to enjoy.
And there needs to be a whole shift around that, because again, because women are kind of almost cracked open and in this different hormonal state, there's the potential to have incredible experiences of the whole body. Like you say, it's not about penis and vagina, it's about the whole enjoyment of the whole body. And it's you know, in terms of tantra and kind of connecting with the full energetic and sharing that energy with someone else or with yourself, it's phenomenal. But it's different, and we don't talk about this. You know, I mean, this is kind of a new area for me to be understanding and exploring, and I'm reading up and I'm listening and I'm talking to people.
There's
and
a
I'm
podcast
experiencing.
On that.
Oh, is there?
It's a midlife sex podcast. Oh yeah, magnificent midlife sex podcast.
Fabulous. Yeah. So that's but it's an important part of our mental health, actually. You know, and who we are, and connecting with with our power.
Yeah, it's very exciting sort of talking about all of this with you, because there is, I think we do need to rebrand menopause and get away from this feeling of loss and see it much more as a transition, as a transformation, as a positive.
It is. But let me just put in there that it is, well, I believe anyway, that it's transformation. But in a way, we do need to connect with the loss of something to allow the beginning of something.
Yes, I agree.
There is that stage in terms of initiation. There has to be an ending for the beginning. So it is, and again, that's a lot of the work I do with women to kind of really process the losses, because other losses rise up at this time, it's amazing, actually. I mean, I think that's where it's at, actually. I think we can really pick up so much treasure when we do actually go into the loss, and then we move through, and that does create the fertile soil for the spring and the new beginnings. So it's a wonderful phase. Has the potential.
And you're right, we need to take the time to do that work. It's like any stage in life, isn't it? We need to mark it. We need to commemorate it. We need to explore it and discover what is there. And as you say, deal with the unresolved issues, because they come and shake their fingers at us in midlife.
Yeah.
They really do.
They do. And, you know, and if we don't kind of tend to them in some way, and it doesn't need to, sometimes it might be in-depth kind of therapeutic work, but actually more often than not, it doesn't have to be a big piece of work, therapeutic work. It can be acknowledging those whatever it might be, to then almost release them to a certain extent, and then kind of moving forward. But it's funny you saying about kind of I can't remember the words you just said, but in terms of acknowledging it, because I was actually thinking this afternoon, I was thinking about menopause and ceremonies, and you know, to kind of I know some people do have menopause parties, as it were. I wouldn't like to use the word party, but that's just me. I love the idea of some kind of ceremony. I've started to use ceremony quite a lot in my life. If for something, I mean, we've talked about the moons already, the moon, but other things, you know, something significant's happening or what have you, just a ritual and a ceremony. Just thought, oh yeah, we could do with a bit more of that.
Well, it's tapping into that female energy, isn't it, and that female power again.
Yeah.
So will you be having your menopause ceremony at some stage?
Well, yeah. I mean, and it's I mean, who knows when it will be, but I for sure, yeah. But I mean, it'd be interesting to see where the world is then, really. I mean, who knows when it'll be? I think for my mum was around the age of 50. So yeah, I've got quite a long way until then, but it's about, I mean, I work with women generally in their 40s and probably the first half of their 50s. So of course, some women, I feel like we're at a similar hormonal stage, but I guess I'm, you know, can guide them with my psychology. Other women are older than me and I'm guiding them with my psychological knowledge, but I'm also, it's very reciprocal, you know, I'm also hearing from them, and if I'm helping them to tap into their wisdom, I then soak that up, and it's really lovely. It's so different from how I used to be as a therapist. It's much more connected and reciprocal. I love it. I really do. So yeah, I'll be seeing how women kind of transition themselves, and then we'll see where it goes for me.
And what's your best advice for getting out of the sort of clutches of anxiety if we're really stuck, feeling very anxious because now we've got COVID and we've got everything else going on and it's all a bit
Yeah. Well, my advice, I guess, would be it is that turning towards it. I actually have this process that I help women to go through when the anxiety really overwhelms us, you know, in those moments of absolute overwhelm. And it's the now process. So the N is the noticing it. I mean, that's the key. If we can actually notice whatever it might be, wherever you're feeling in the body, because we all feel it in different places, but noticing it, and then the trick is to actually tune into it. And people first think, what's she on about? But feel it more. Really concentrate on where it is in your body. So if your stomach is churning, or if your heart is racing, or if you're feeling dizzy, or your hands are tingling, whatever it might be, that whatever sensation, physical sensation, really, really pay attention and concentrate on it. Because the discomfort of anxiety isn't actually the initial anxiety. It's the struggle of us trying to get rid of it. That's the discomfort science has showed us. So actually, if we notice and turn towards it, and I know this is hard and it feels counterintuitive, because as human beings, we've learned to kind of, when something's not nice, we get rid of it, we problem solve it, or whatever it might be. And this is kind of the opposite, because we need to respond to emotions differently. But yeah, turn towards it, notice it, concentrate on it. Then you're not having that struggle of trying to get rid of it. And that then dissipates the intensity of it. So that's the noticing, that's the end. Then the next stage is opening up our senses. And that's a way of grounding us in the moment. So once you've kind of noticed where it is and concentrated on it, then really grounding yourself by opening up your senses. And that can be, smell, obviously, sight, touch, whatever it might be. I do find that smell, if you haven't had COVID, and this is, an issue, people lose sense of smell, but smell can really ground you in the here and now. Or touch, so kind of really pressing your feet into the ground, and I like to imagine that the roots are growing beneath you into the ground, just really opening up the senses. And then the W is wrap yourself up in self-compassion. Wrap yourself in a blanket of self-compassion, and there are ways of doing that. And I have a free guide, actually. We could put this in the show notes, in terms of, I've got a guide to take you through that process of exactly what to do for the N, or for the O, and for the W. It can really change your response to anxiety. And the more you do that, the more the body learns to not feel threatened by anxiety. Doesn't mean you're never going to experience anxiety, because that would be really weird, but it means that you're okay with feeling anxious.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Magnificent Midlife Podcast. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe, share it, and leave me a review wherever you're listening. It really helps me get the message out. You can find out more information about this episode in the show notes at magnificentmidlife.com. That's also where you'll find strategies, support, and resources to help make your midlife magnificent. Get clarity on how to make the most of your next chapter. Help me change the world, one magnificent midlife woman at a time.